All right, let's take a look at feudalism in Europe and Japan. I know we've already talked about Japan. Let's take another look at kind of Europe and the way things go. Remember, our whole idea of feudalism, what was it needed for? Protection from invaders, okay? It brought some unification. We know the Middle Ages happened after the fall of Rome. The fall of Rome, the biggest reason was all the different clans and stuff invaded into Rome and led to the destruction of Rome, as we talked about earlier in the chapter. So now we have this idea of how do we actually fight against all those other clans? How do we unify the area? So protection for invaders. Security. It's a way that we can actually secure the people, secure the land, and make sure we're safe. Unification. From here, we'll start to build countries. Okay? Centralized laws in government. Matter of fact, one of the greatest documents we've written during this time, they actually give people rights for the very, very first time. They will lead to a greater document later on, but that document called the Magna Carta. And it becomes what this whole idea of feudalism is our socio-political economic system. Socio takes care of all of society's needs. Economic sets up a system of barter and trade, try to organize and keep that all together. And last bit of it, is political, which is our government that we have from there. The main focus on this, of course, is going to be our castle. We start castle here. This castle, basically almost like the castle at Conway. It's actually out on a peninsula. You can't attack from here by ships. They don't have the technology, but you can only attack from here by the land. It's very well protected. Here you can see kind of our diagram of the castle itself, the main entrance through here. This one here, they have not even built the barracks and the huts and stuff on the inner part of that yet. Here you can see a little bit of the barracks and stuff here, where your horses, where your soldiers would be. There's a greater idea of that, with the tower in the center, church possibly in the back. We can see the towers here. We can see an inner ward, an outer ward that includes a moat. Then you'd have one more outer ward that would actually collect the village and stuff through that. So as you can see how this is actually kind of built out. Okay? How do you attack it? Well, that's where we're going to be talking about a lot of different weapons, especially a great group called the Knights. Okay? Excuse me. First of all, here we go. General, we're all out of cats. Then change the setting to rockapult, you fool. So here we are, our catapults and stuff, and are some of our early weapons. Okay? In Europe, our feudal system is set up king. Vassals and lords, those who were loyal to the king, got land, and with that land, they became a vassal. Knights, tradespeople, serfs, and peasants. Make it comparable to Japan when we talked about it, the emperor, the shogun and the daimyo, the samurai, the peasants, and the merchants down at the bottom. Remember, merchants are down at the bottom here because they traded with outsiders. We know that each kingdom had its heraldic sign. With those heraldic signs or heraldic symbols, you can see here like some of these that represent. If you are a leader, you might have something on there that represents that you were like this first son or the second son or the third son, that you became that leader through there. It gave you family, it gave you heritage, it gave you something about your land and where you're from. It gave you pride, like this lion here means something. Now, the good part about this, guys, is when you go on to Jupiter grades, from Jupiter grades to materials, from materials you go to the history section, and you're going to pull something like this down. When you pull this down, this is your heraldic sign. This is going to be an assignment for you. Nice, neat color. Your name's going to go right across here on this ribbon. And on here, there are some different ideas of things that you can use. Something that it's you, your family. Something on the way that you pull into it. But you're going to create your heraldic symbol that you have. Nice, neat design color based on you. I encourage you to go on and just kind of type in different shields and stuff that you can find. Some of you might even have with your family name. We actually have ours with the name Garrett. It's in my classroom. My wife has hers with her maiden name Madden. So you can look at those different things from there. Some of you might actually have those at home. We talked about at the beginning of the year. Here it is on you now. If you're looking for different things, go with things like symbols, things that represent what you and who you are, even like your likes, your hobbies, and different things that you can do. The main part of the Middle Ages, one of the biggest things we have here is the Knights. I think you'll enjoy this week watching Knights fight again on Warriors. I've recommended that to you. You can find that on YouTube. No, you don't have worksheet, and no, you don't have to take any notes on that. We do know that Terry Shepard, we really like him, and there's some other videos and stuff that are out there. But those knights in those full armor is very different than what we saw our samurai with their armor. This armor was very solid. This armor was not very movable, and these swords were not as sharp as possible. They're called a broadsword. Here are some of our knights in shining armor here out of the Metropolitan Museum in New York. I had to think where I was for a second here. You can see that they even put the metal on the horses here. You can see them here with their lances fighting a distance, and with the metal on the horses across, the metal on there. Very, 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 very uncomfortable. These knights had a code of honor that they had to follow through. It was that code of chivalry that became very important to them. And that code of chivalry became who they were. And they were there to protect that idea of loyalty, that idea of honor, and protecting the king and protecting the kingdom. And this honor became extremely huge. When the knights weren't fighting, the knights were practicing, kind of like what our soldiers do today. Here we go, with practicing for the jousting of the horse. Me, I was charging on the right when you suddenly went left. So I went left and then you went right again, you idiot. We look at these different things here. That code of chivalry in Europe: honor, respect, courtesy, defending the weak, loyalty to one's lord, defend the church, and courage at all times. In Japan, when we talked about this, we called that code, we call it the way of the warrior, we call it Bushido. Gentlemanly conduct, exemplary life, duty, honor, respect, willing to give one's life, fearless in battle, and loyal. One of the biggest things you won't see here is willing to give one's life. That idea of seppuku is going to be the idea that's very, very singular out in Japan. We do not see that here in Europe. You took this oath of fealty, this oath of loyalty to your king, and you swore lordship to him. With that, you earned title and you earned land. And that's what we have in 1066 from William, Duke of Normandy. He had a lot of people that he had to actually thank for his victory, and he gave land to those people, and he granted them. Here, you can see him donning basically his sword onto the shoulder that you'll follow through. You can see the shields and stuff over here on the side. Even when they wore it here on their tunics, you can see some of those same symbols. Those knights' codes became very, very important. Fair play, nobility, valor, honor, courtesy, and of course, loyalty. When they went into battle, they took their shields. They had it here on the horse. They had their symbols and stuff that they traveled with. Okay? Most of your knights fought for land and title. You did not see them out freelancing. Okay? They fought for their lord, and they followed along with their lord. When it came to their weaponry, this is where it really hurts me because I was wishing I was in my classroom. I have chainmail for you. We'll take a look at that. Hopefully next year come back and visit. Chainmail. We also I have the helmets and the chest plates, the back plate, and I also have all my different swords. Here, most European knights fought either on horseback or on foot. Chainmail is a series of like small pieces and links of chain. They're all linked together. It works out great against things such as like arrows from a distance. However, if you take an arrow and put a metal tip through it, it'll chew right on through there, and so that's when we have our first armor piercing. Steel armor suits. As long as you stood upright, things were good. If you ever fell down, you had to have someone help you up. So you became kind of like a turtle on your back if you ever fell down. Maces, flails, hammers, and axes. These are all just broad, crude weapons. Anything that you could do to dent that metal, especially if you're denting the metal here in the chest, or if you're denting the metal on the head, you can cause brain damage or cause problems towards someone's heart, breaking ribs, whatever it may be. Broadswords, spears and lances, of course bows and arrows, and they did use shields. We didn't see a lot of shields here in Japan, but we do see shields here. Okay? The weaponry we always think of today, very, very different than it would have been there. No, I can't be bothered to see some crazy salesman. We've got a battle to win. As the knight goes out here with his army, but the salesman's selling a machine gun. We know those machine guns were not even possible. Those not be around until about the 1860s with our first hand crank machine gun called the Gatling gun. But here, those crude weapons, lances, bow arrow, spears, broadswords, maces, battle axes, different things they have. Even like some of those things that we see here, like in our show that's down toward Knott's Berry Farm called Medieval Times. Great idea. They show a little bit of the fighting. Please remember it's entertainment. Of course, they're not fighting to the death when they go and fight for those things. Those ideas of flails and maces, a mace, just a stick with sometimes a metal ball or even a metal hammer at the end. If it's a flail, then they put like a piece of chain or even a chain with a ball. We call it sometimes a ball and chain. but it's how they go and fight, how they go and attack. How do you attack a castle? Open the gate, it's a big wiener dog. So we know we have kind of like a Trojan horse. Attacking a castle is going to be very, very, very difficult to go through. But we have like these here with our maces. We have here with our spears. We have arrows coming through. Hey, come on, hold it, hold it, hold it, or someone's going to get hurt. Modern day jousting. Here, bad idea for a design on your shirt. You don't ever want to have that. What did I tell you, Boris? These uniforms are a crock. I came to religion. Religion does play a part of it. With that religion, Christianity is going to be the main alliance, and the church is going to be very powerful. The church is going to start to unify Europe once again. At the same time, around Europe, Islam is expanding in the east and expanding in the west. Areas like Portugal and Spain in the west, and now moving around toward the Byzantine Empire over in the Far East. Japan was linked by Buddhism, Shintoism, and of course Confucianism, which kept that code of conduct and that code of loyalty. That code of loyalty became big. When it comes down to a code of loyalty, we had a group of lords who actually looked and they realized that they had a difference between the loyalty. They are the middleman between, they have to be loyal to the people underneath them. Keep them safe, keep them secure, keep them out of poverty. And they have a code of ethics and loyalty to the king. Well, in 1215, we had a king by the name of John. King John of England was not doing a good job looking out for his people. With his greed, he started to tax and tax and tax and tax. This is where we get our story of Robin Hood. It's where we get our stories that basically take us through there as to what was happening with the taxation without representation, which is going to be our screaming call. You should remember taxation without representation from 5th grade, American Revolution. You'll also need to remember that for 8th grade. So what happens is John keeps trying to tax and tax and tax, and finally the lords gather together and say, John, you can't tax. He says, I can, I'm the king. Say, John, you can't, you're overtaxing the people, we're going to have a peasant rebellion. So what eventually happens here is they basically force John to sign a great charter. Matter of fact, so great, it's called Magnificent Charter, the Magna Carta. You cannot forget this. Because the Magna Carta, for the first time ever, we told the King of England, John, you will sign this that says that you will not tax, you will not make laws, you will not make big changes unless you talk to the lords, because we are the ones who have to approve this. This means that they're going to have a group that's going to be later on called Parliament, or today would be like what we have in the United States called Congress. These people are the representatives of the people, what's in need. John, you will sign this, or we'll cut your head off and we'll put somebody else under that will. John signs it. He's forced to sign it. This is actually the Magna Carta. It's a copy in England. I think there's a copy in France, and actually the United States does have a copy. It is in Washington, D.C. You can go visit. Now, John doesn't want to sign it, but John really doesn't have a choice. He's being forced to sign it and has to do whatever he can to sign it. This will be for the first time ever that we put the law above the king. Not the king above the law is above the king. The king cannot just make whatever rules that the king wants, cannot make whatever laws that the king wants, cannot make whatever taxes that the king wants. This gives the people, this gives the lords what we'll call due process. And due process becomes very important. This is what the American Revolution is going to be about. This idea of due process, this idea of right to representation. King John saves his head because later on a king of England named James II will kind of ignore what his lords have to say. Since James II ignores what the lords have to say, in 1688 they cut off James II's head, put in a new king and queen, and bring in a new system of rule that will be called Parliament. The Magna Carta becomes the great document that for the first time ever puts rights for people. This is in your book. You have some ideas of how it links, especially here to the U.S. Bill of Rights. The Magna Carta today, you can go and visit. Mr. Cecil, myself, Mr. Cole, my son, another student. We go and visit that along with our Declaration of Independence, U.S. Constitution, and Bill of Rights every single year. This is going to be kind of the beginning of the downfall of our kings, which is going to lead us into our next time period here, from the Middle Ages into our next time period called the Renaissance. So what do we have as far as our legacy here? Our legacy that we have left behind, literature. We're going to find some of the greatest epic stories and epic poetry that we've ever had. From the story of Roland. okay, to other poems and stuff that are out there like Canterbury Tales. These are great stories that tell us the history that we have. The role of women. Women will have no role in government, and that will be passed on over to anywhere that England pretty much goes, that women will not have a role in government. It will not be until the 1920s in the United States that women actually have finally the right to vote, and women still today are fighting for those rights. Arranged marriages are going to be huge, where women actually have a dowry. That dowry is, hey, I want to marry my daughter off to someone who can bring her status up. Here's what I can offer with her, and it's usually a trunk of all these different things. Could be land, could be gold and jewelry, could be other supplies and stuff that people would want. What do you do for your marriage? We still see these things today. Like in a wedding, the father of the bride still hands off his daughter to the groom. We also know that when it comes to a wedding, that the bride's family pays for the wedding. We still see these things coming down. They've been passed on from generation to generation to generation that come down from the Middle Ages. Strong military organization, which we still see that today. A system of laws for the people, especially through the Magna Carta. The development of countries. And also our population going to finally start to increase here because we start to slow down the wars. And matter of fact, we have so many different people that we start to use people's last names. Are you talking about John the blacksmith? Or are you talking about John the goldsmith? You're talking about John the carter? So now you start to have John Carter, you have John Smith, you have John Black, and now we have different people with different names. And some of your last names will actually match to some of these here. This is what we're moving toward, that idea of countries, that idea from kingdom to country. However, some of those old kingdoms are still there. Spain, at one point, was 5 different kingdoms. It'll become 1 eventually later on. That whole history of the feudal Europe, that idea of the Middle Ages, that idea of the Dark Ages, we get a lot of history and a lot of stories that pass down from one generation to next generation, and they're still there with us today. Thank you guys. Have a good day. Everybody be safe. Bye now.